thank you for being here for our Smart Women, Smart Power event tonight. We're excited and delighted that 7 ambassadors currently representing their countries here in Washington can join us for a look at the view of the U.S. from abroad. And as you may have noticed, they happen to all be female ambassadors, and they are just a subset of those representing their countries here in Washington. Before we begin, I'll get to introducing the ambassadors in a few moments, but first I want to give you a few social media reminders. We hope you're following us on Twitter @SmartWomen, and there should have been handouts, hopefully you got them, with all the ambassadors' Twitter handles. And if you're live tweeting, we also ask that you use the hashtag CSISLive. We do have, as you probably know, a Smart Women podcast and an iTunes U course with our Smart Women events. We hope that you're following those as well. Our Smart Women, Smart Power speaker series wouldn't be possible without the support of Citi. Thank you very much to Citi for helping us amplify the voices of women in foreign policy, national security, international business, and international development. And so I'm pleased to welcome Kristen Solheim, excuse me, Kristen, Director of Federal Government Affairs at Citi.
Hi, Happy New Year, Happy 2018. This is our 4th year sponsoring this series, and I'm really excited to kick it off with this group of fabulous women. They have the most amazing resumes. They represent a slice of the women that are here in the United States representing countries from around the globe. So this is going to be a fascinating panel. The countries that they're coming from, you'll hear more about, but St. Kitts and Nevis, Kosovo, Rwanda, Finland, Sweden, fascinating different places from around the world. I'm sure they all have different perspectives, but they're all women, so I'm sure there's going to be a little grain of similarity between what their thoughts about what's happening in the United States and around the world. There's no one better than Nina Easton to conduct the panel, and I know she's back from what looked like a phenomenal trip in Africa, so excited to hear about that and a lot more. So thank you for being here, and I'm happy to turn it back to Kathleen Hicks.
All right, thank you, Kristen, and thank you to Citi for the continuing support. All right, I have the unenviable task of introducing these 7 women, and I say that because it's not without its challenges and enunciation. So I hope you will forgive me. I think I have this right, but if I mess it up, please believe that I tried. And if you can just indicate who I'm saying as I walk down the line. On stage here, we have Her Excellency Vlora Sidiku, who's the Ambassador of Kosovo. We have Her Excellency Wafa Bogaikis, who's the Ambassador of Libya. We have Her Excellency Thelma Philip Brown, Ambassador of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have Her Excellency Mathilde Mukunbana, who's the Ambassador of Rwanda. Her Excellency Karen Olofsdotter, Ambassador of Sweden. Her Excellency Dr. Arakana Chiumbori-Kwao, little off there, sorry, Kwao, and Her Excellency Kirsti Kauppi, Ambassador of Finland. And I'm sorry, Ambassador, I have to do it again now, Chiumbori-Kwao is the Ambassador of the African Union. Our moderator, as Kristen said, is CSIS Senior Associate Nina Easton. Nina is also the chair of Fortune's Most Powerful Women International Summit and the co-chair of the Fortune Global Forum. Thank you all again for joining us, and over to you, Nina.
Thank you, and a round of applause for all of these women, first of all. Yeah. It is truly an awesome and intimidating experience to be around all these amazing women. We're first going to go down and talk to each of them a little bit about themselves and their countries, and then we'll talk about some overarching geopolitical themes. But I really want to include you. So once we do 2 rounds, we are going to take questions from the audience. Go ahead and have them ready. There's cards. We will pick them up, and we will read off the questions to our participants. So thank you. I'm first going to turn to my left from Sweden, Ambassador Olofsdotter, because it's really interesting that Sweden has what it overtly calls a feminist foreign policy. And
we do.
How's that going, and what is it?
It's going very well. We actually have the first feministic government. that then has a feministic foreign policy.
So you say feministic. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. That's good.
Oh, well, that's maybe a language thing. I don't know.
I like that term. I like that word.
No, and in
I'm
a
gonna
shame,
borrow it. Okay.
in a way, it's a shame that we even need to have it.
Yeah.
Because and that it's remarkable that we sit here as women is also in a way
Yeah.
sad, but it's true. So I'm very proud and happy to represent a feministic government and being maybe the result of a feministic government, because I'm the first woman appointed as ambassador to the United States from Sweden.
Oh, that's interesting.
But going into policy, it's really something, it's not just a foreign policy, this is something that, does it sound weird? Yeah. Actually, all of government is working on a feministic agenda, so it doesn't matter which government agency, they have to really dig into equality issues, make sure that their work is for equal rights and women and men have the same opportunities. We still have challenges in my country. Does this? It's
Sounds
okay?
good, okay.
Yeah, maybe I'm just hearing myself. No, but for instance, still in Sweden, women only earn 87% of what men earn. So
Right.
there's a pay gap, etc. So we have challenges in my country that we are dealing with nationally. But then the government also thought it was very important to take these issues further. And really, in all our foreign policy matters, we always have to look at women's issues, because it's very important that we really strive for that women have the same rights and responsibilities and representation as men.
So give me an example of that.
For instance, right now, Sweden is a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So in all the presidential statements that have been done on the Security Council since we've been there, 100% of them have included women's issues. So that's one very important result, I think. We bring it up in our development cooperation much more than we did before, focusing on women and their economic power. Also sexual and reproductive health is extremely important to us, and there we don't see eye to eye with the US administration right now. And we think this is very serious because, of course, a lot of women die and are abused, etc. So those are issues that are very important. When we look to trade, we always try to look, so where are the women and how can we, through our work, strengthen women as economic actors in the field. We do that with all countries, so even countries within the European Union, we address it all the time. So it really is something that we consciously look at in all the issues we are working on.
So your focus is bringing women's issues in. Do you ever look at things like conflict in a different way if it's a feminist foreign policy?
I think so, because what we have concluded is that if women are, for instance, represented in peace negotiations, you would probably have a much more stable peace afterwards, because women bring other issues to the table than men.
Right.
So it's extremely important. And why shouldn't 50% of the population be included in all these issues? Why
Right.
have we been excluded before?
Right.
So it's just the right thing to do, actually.
So turning to the African Union with Dr. Shiambori Quo. Now, this is interesting. She was, for 25 years, a medical doctor in Tennessee, in a town near where Bev grew up. How do you say that? Murfreesboro? Murfreesboro. Both her daughters are graduated. One's already graduated from Yale Medical School, and the other one's in Yale Medical School. So pretty impressive. What drove you to take on this position that you have now?
Well, I was minding my own business. Actually, in bed, it was exactly 3:02 in the morning when my phone rang, and it was then Chairman of the African Union, Chairman Zuma, informing me that my predecessor had turned in her resignation and that she was going to be running for president of Tanzania. And that she couldn't think of anyone better than myself to take on that role. Of course, I loved it, her. I couldn't see myself as an ambassador. I said, well, what do you think I know? I'm a medical doctor. And she reminded me that she herself is a pediatrician. and that I should take some time and think about it. I thought she was kidding. About a week later, she called me again, and then slowly I began to realize that she was really serious. So we joke about it. We say she courted me like a man would be courting a woman. It took her 6 months to finally get me to say yes. But it was not an easy decision because it never occurred to me that my experience as a family physician would more than prepare me for diplomacy. And before I finally made the call to the chairman to say that I would take the position, I had a conversation with my husband who reminded me of how, as a physician, you can very nicely tell a woman that she's overweight, but that it is our problem together. And that together we are going to deal with it, and that you and this woman who otherwise would be exceptionally uncomfortable having this conversation can actually laugh about it, joke about it, and get on this journey together. So he reminded me that every day, sometimes 10, 20 times a day, is one episode in diplomacy after the other. Because of the different scenarios that we run into as doctors. You can picture a situation where in exam room number 1, it's a lady who just lost her husband that calls for a specific emotion at that time. And then you leave exam room number 1 to exam room number 2. It's a young lady who just came back from a honeymoon because she just got married. So you're going to 2 extremes of emotions in a short period of time, and the emotions and the changes that are required, they go on from one exam room after the other, each exam room being a different adventure and a different change of gears at a much faster pace, I must say, in a doctor's life than what's happening in diplomacy.
Yeah.
So I can comfortably say, being a doctor, contrary to what I would have thought, more than prepared me for what I'm doing now.
So Ambassador, as a doctor, can you diagnose the African Union and tell us what the health issues are?
Yes, I think the African Union requires, it's a multi-specialty approach. I think in some cases, general surgery is definitely needed. In some cases, we need orthopedic surgeons to break some bones. In some cases, we need neurosurgeons to drill into the brains. And so, and occasionally, maybe often enough, actually, we need psychiatrists. So yes, we do.
And I'm going to hear more about that in the next round and in questioning. But let's move on to Finland. Ambassador Kauppi, you've always been known, Finland's always been known as a country with pretty good on the gender equality level. But what's fascinating is this new number that just came out that actually in your country, men spend more time with their kids than women. By 8 minutes, but still.
8 minutes per
Do you
day.
think that's cultural? How much is cultural and how much is policy driven?
I think it is both, and culture obviously has an impact on policies, and policies have an impact on culture. So it is both. I think early on in the history of my nation, by the way, the nation is 100 years old as an independent country. Last year we celebrated our centennial. The nation is older than that. But early on in the history of my nation, the notion sort of took root that we need everybody to make it and to make our country a success. And when we started as an independent country, Finland was actually quite poor, one of the poorest countries in Europe. We had a civil war straight away after the independence, and today we are one of the most successful countries in the world. And if you want to find one sort of explanation, single most important explanation to that, we do think that it is equality, gender equality, but equality at large. And the social policies and policies that we have put in place, all of them have really the goal to promote gender equality. So that's
and
very
do you feel like
fundamental.
you've made it and you're there, or are there initiatives to go farther on that front?
Absolutely. Like Karin said, there are a lot of challenges. And it's funny, you even if you reach a high level, you can never sort of rest, because there are always new challenges, and there is even the possibility of sliding back. So one of the big areas which obviously we have a very strong social policy in all the Nordic countries, and a lot of policies in place to make it possible for women to be fully part of the workforce, and also to share the so-called burden of children equally between men and women. But there are a lot of challenges, and one of the areas which is a very challenging area is work. The work, jobs and work is changing very rapidly because of technologies, and because of the economic changes. And how do you maintain the high level of, for instance, public services in that kind of a situation? That is one of the big challenges. I might also say, or I should say, that we have to remember that gender equality also means equality for men. And in some areas in Finland, we are more worried about what is happening to boys and men. So it is very
That's
important to remember that as well.
Same for us.
That's very interesting. Now we turn to Rwanda with Ambassador Mukana Bana. Also spent a lot of time in this country teaching history in Sacramento. How many years? 10 years?
10 years.
10
More
years.
than that.
Before you took on this job.
That's right, yeah.
What drove you?
Thank you so much. For a long time, I lived in California as a refugee. There's always a sense, and it's the experience that most Rwandans went through. I left my country when I was 13, very
And what
young.
year was that? That was during the...
A long time ago. That was prior to genocide.
Prior to the genocide.
Of course, yeah. And pretty much lived separated from my parents through many African countries until I landed in California for a number of reasons. But what I can tell you is that Rwanda never ceased to be part of us. It became almost like an ideal you needed to reach. So even in foreign countries, what we did was to try to organize and to become activists so we can go back. And I always say that for me, it became like two mothers. The United States became one, and I was given the opportunities to be able to go back. And there was a time when you said Rwanda, it was not a country we were proud to go back to because of division, because of many different things. But when the call came, especially a few years back, it was one of the best things that I could embrace, that I didn't think twice before I could go back and abandon whatever security I had in California and so on and so forth. Because for me, it was always like a mission and a responsibility also to give back to that particular country. So when we talk about women, most of them were in my own circumstances, because the majority of people in Rwanda, or at least the ones now, were refugees, or they had liabilities of other kinds. They stayed in the country. The majority survived a horrible genocide. And I don't want to go back to that to tell you that in the wake of genocide, there's no institution functioning in the country, whether it was the state, whether it was the church, whether it was the family even. So the women did a lot, even in that particular perspective, to survive, to mend the fabrics of broken societies, broken families, and so on and so forth. And people played their part. But also the new leadership that was coming in was intending to use or to open the door to women. Because number one, because of the reality, more women survive. There was a big gender ratio that has collapsed in Rwanda. There were 60% of women. And for us, the empowerment of women was also part of recovery. Not only that, but because even before all the NGOs came, before all the programs came, the women tried to take chaff and grain and whatever, and they tried to mend, to try to survive. So our women had agency way before. They are not subjects where you come and give something. They had agency in the worst of circumstances. And after genocide and in the road to recovery, when we set the agenda, and also I have to say President Kagame is a pro-women empowerment, it was passed in a legal framework, and then the practice started to come. We are not perfect, but what I'm saying is that once the legal framework came, when we put it in the constitution that women had to be represented, the practice followed, and this is something on that particular course that we are on.
And I've read about in Rwanda they call it the Rosie the Riveter phenomenon, where men weren't around, men were killed, women took up and started businesses. Isn't there quite a women's entrepreneur culture that's
Very
helped
big.
rebuild the country?
Including, when we look at the genocide, people died, but women were even more violated than anybody.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we had more than 600,000 rapes. And some people,
600,000.
people were infected with HIV. We had generations of Rwandans who were born out of rape. So even when we talk about our reconciliation process, if we talk about reconciliation and what we had to put in place to bring a society that can function together, we have also to think in terms of intimate reconciliation. When you look in the eyes of your child and you are able to forgive them and you forgive yourself. Someone who has killed your husband and you have a living proof that that person was there. So we have that generation of young Rwandans. So when we talk about our reconciliation, it's a very uphill battle, but we are there because now Rwanda is able to function together, to have an identity. And it's one of the biggest challenges among our youth because we have the children who were born out of rape, you have the children whose parents died during genocide, you have children whose parents killed. How do you blend the society? How do you bring society together? So that's pretty much why I admire my country, because there was no single model where you were able to bring all these people together, are able to bring a society that is functioning in today's perspective. And you can't really remove the role of women, because the women could navigate all those spheres. They were married to genocidaires. They were married to the victims. They were sometimes the mothers to the children, and they were violated sometimes. So you are looking at women who became very strong and who build on resilience and a certain strength. So it's pretty much that.
A challenging time.
Yeah.
So turning to St. Kitts and Nevis, Ambassador Philip Brown, tell us about your country, the smallest sovereign state in the Western Hemisphere. You did okay, but not great during this past hurricane season with Hurricane Irma and Maria. What are the key issues for you?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be among a diverse group of wonderful women here. Our country is the smallest in the Western Hemisphere. St. Kitts and Nevis. Nevis is just all of 36 square miles. It was a little bit larger, but a tsunami took Jamestown in the 1700s. St. Kitts is 68 square miles, but pure beauty, both of them. They're interesting in that when the trade winds come off of Africa, they're two of the first islands that the trade winds meet. So normally, Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis are the first to experience hurricanes. And in fact, if you follow the track. They were headed directly towards us. But Irma deviated a little bit north, and Maria deviated a little bit south, and so we were spared the brunt of the hurricane. $150 million worth of damage is nothing to sneeze at, but when you compare with Dominica, over $2 billion, and some of the islands, we have not even as yet computed the amount of damage and the human suffering. We got off pretty good. That said, in small islands and in the Lesser Antilles, the islands are very close. And we move around a lot. So everyone in St. Kitts and Nevis has relatives in Puerto Rico and St. Martin and so forth. So you were on Facebook and asking where your relatives were. I didn't hear from my nephew in Tortola for a week. The first sign I had of anything to do with him, we had a picture with his pickup in the sea. And so that was frightening. And then I go back and, people tell me of the devastation and the anxiety looking at the hurricane coming towards them, the expenditure to prepare for the hurricane. And though they were happy, it still left a scar because they had to be preparing all these boxes. At one time, they ran out of food because they had to be sending boxes to all these other countries. So it is very traumatic for the islands, and we are hoping that this next year would be better. We are hoping against hope that this is not the new norm, but we are also mindful of the issues of climate change, and I know it might not be politically correct to say it, but for us, and for me particularly, who was born a stone's throw from the sea, and realized that 20 years ago we had to build a seawall to keep the sea out. It is real, and that is one of the biggest challenges we have because it's a threat to our very existence. It's health, economic, security, mental health, to everything. And so
you're going to be facing that. It's getting worse as the years go, so thank you for sharing that. Moving on to Libya, Ambassador Bugaigas.
Yes.
I apologize. You are you're kind of home here. You went to Catholic University, got your chemical engineering degree, spent time at GWU. Libya, talk about a country that's been through difficult times, and you've been involved in rebuilding civil society and participation of women. Where do things stand on that front now?
You're talking about women or the country?
Well, let's start with civil society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank CSIS for organizing this great event. We follow it every time you host great women here. And thanks to all the participants and audience here. Libya is my country is going through very challenging times. It's been challenging since the uprising in 2011. Things didn't quite go according to our aspirations and hopes. Nevertheless, despite all the challenges we are facing, hope still drives us to continue working to regain back our stability and rebuild our institutions. It's very much, I would say, after the armed conflicts, it leaves the country broken with no institutions, and it's not an easy job to rebuild, and you need all the institutions to hold the state so you can implement all the human rights and legislations and rule of law. Now, women fought hard after the uprising to enter the political landscape, and the aspirations were very high. Nevertheless, after a while, security threats, instability, social and cultural barriers hindered those efforts a great deal. Civil society was very strong right after the uprising, and as my colleague, the ambassador of Rwanda, said here, women step up always in crisis, and they hold the society, and this is what happened in Libya while men were fighting in the front lines. It was women who held the society together and took care of daily life and helping the life to continue. Nevertheless, when the dust settled down, we were back to square one. Social, economic barriers surfaced again up, and then security threats and crimes and violence. Now the efforts of women, of course, faded, but nevertheless, we're still hoping that we will come back and start where we ended.
I sense some pessimism in your voice, even while you try to be hopeful.
It hasn't been easy. It's been very challenging and very difficult. I mean, it's been tough 7 years on the country, and 7 years is a long period really to endure. You know, each year we were hopeful for the year after. We had great elections. We were on the road for democracy, and we were fighting hard to promote women's rights and women, you know, we were issuing legislations, and civil society was very active. We were pushing hard for women participation, and we didn't realize that things will have this turn, and then it became security that became a priority now. It's not women's rights anymore, you know what I'm saying? When people are searching for security and thriving, we have extremism, we have crimes, we have a lot of insecure borders. It's been very challenging, and we are hopeful. I mean, the UN is working out a plan with us, and we hope it will work. I am cautiously optimistic. Yes, we might still have to struggle for some time because things don't stay status quo. It's been difficult on the people, on daily lives. People are struggling hard for their daily life in a very rich country. Healthcare, education, everything has become challenging and difficult, and to see that happening is sometimes way beyond, you know, bearing, and
it's hard seeing that happen to a country you love.
Yes, yes.
It's a beautiful country. Kosovo, Ambassador Siddiqui, your country went through difficult times a while ago, and you've been involved in the campaign for women who were raped during the Kosovo War. Talk about that, and why don't you talk about the healing process that brought the country to where it is now?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us here. It feels great to be in an all-women panel. Yes. It's not very common. I am from Kosovo, which is the youngest democracy and youngest demography. My colleagues have heard this joke so many times, but I keep repeating it because I love it. We are just 2 years younger than Twitter. Put it in context. But we are also a very young demography. 70% of the population are under 30. So
wow.
I'm well.
70%?
Yes, under 30. So I'm not young for Kosovo standards. And thirdly, Kosovo is by far the most pro-American nation on earth. We have a Bill Clinton statue next to a George W. Bush Boulevard. We're very unique. And we're going to celebrate our 10th birthday next month. I was so envious of my Finnish colleague. 100 years.
Wow.
And, you know, when we grow up, I hope we will become like Finland because it's truly an inspiring model of gender equality. It is true, Kosovo has gone through a lot. Just 18 years ago, it was a state on ruins, on ashes. Over half of the population was deported. Thousands of women were raped. Families were destroyed. Families were torn apart. But Kosovo is no longer known only for its tragic past. Because of women, Kosovo has become also a story of success and inspiration. Although we are the youngest democracy in Europe, we were the first country in Southeastern Europe to have the commander-in-chief, a woman president. We also are the country with the largest number of golden medals per capita. So I don't confuse you, that's just one. But that was also won by a woman, a young girl named Majlinda Kelmendi. Waited for her chance because Kosovo just joined the Olympics committee a couple of years ago, and it was in Rio we had the chance to compete for the first time. And there was this young woman. And by the way, in judo, you never say in Kosovo you fight like a girl. You don't end up very well. But there's this young woman who trained in terrible conditions, often without electricity, refused offers from many governments who gave her and offered her millions so she could compete for other flags. But she waited for her chance to compete and win for Kosovo. Giving all of us a lesson, especially us in the public service, that not everything is for sale and there are things money cannot buy. She has become our nation's inspiration, role model, and she's done for Kosovo far more than all of the other ambassadors combined. And another example, very, very important example I want to share with you is the survivors of the sexual violence in Kosovo. I have never seen women that are that brave. For me, they're true heroes because they had to endure so much. The physical part of the pain is probably the easiest to heal. But the trauma, the stigma that they've suffered after the war was just terrible and heartbreaking. But they never gave up. They stood together. They organized associations. They helped one another. They relied on one another. And they never, ever called for revenge.
Never called for?
For revenge. Never, ever. And when interviewed, one of them said, well, hate is too much of a heavy burden to carry. I don't have time to hate. I have to take care of my kids. I have a family to worry about. Kosovo needs to move on. And this is what women have brought in Kosovo, because state building is far easier than society building. You adopt a law, a constitution. It is challenging, but it's much easier than society building, than building a social cohesion in a society that just came out from the war. So I am proud of everything what women did in Kosovo, and I'm even prouder to represent them in Washington, D.C.
So what do you all think of this? And raise your hands if you want to chime in. This whole question of whether women approach conflict and moving past conflict, without getting Pollyanna, do they approach it in a different way, and how so?
I think that women approach it differently because they are mothers, they are spouses, they are everything. You know, I mean, no matter how much we look at if we talk in abstract and talk about women movement maybe, just a little bit, we have to look at the specifics in everyday life. Especially if I look in my society and my community, it was pretty established that the women were the heart of the home.
In Rwanda.
In Rwanda and in pretty many different societies I know of. So it means that when the older the war is going on, they lose almost everything. They lose what they are sent for. They lose their home, they lose their husbands, they lose their children. And when I look at, for instance, when we were talking about our reconciliation and what was taking place, it meant that sometimes you had really to bring two parts together. And usually the women, because they married all sides, they didn't marry one part of that. That's why our communities were, for instance, very complicated. When I was talking about even the collapse of the family, that's what I was talking about. You know, even when we were talking about ethnicity, there was no pure ethnicity. People intermarried. But the determination who was going to be killed and that was because of a patrilineal society. It doesn't mean that the wife was not intimately and emotionally bound to the person of the other ethnic group. So it means that really there was a diverse interest, like an existential part of your soul that is there to solve. But also, women, I'm not saying in general, I have to come up with women who have been the ones who are actively waging wars. I have never seen many societies where women are waging war. It means that when they are absent in the debate that is bringing the warfare and stuff out there, the discussion is going to be incomplete because the other elements and the other concepts where you can bring peace from another perspective is sometimes absent on the global stage. So that's why I'm saying that.
But
yeah,
if I may add, because very often when we talk about women in conflict, we very often make the mistake of treating women as victims only. Women are heroes. You know, I have met women who took up the gun and fought the Milosevic regime. I have met women who led the peaceful resistance during the 90s. So women are brave. And when it's needed, when it's necessary, I have seen them being great champions of all values the society aspires. But what probably sets the difference is
it's okay.
What sets the difference is the way how we react once the conflict or the war is over. We are more ready, more willing to move on. Because conflicts and wars do attack women in much more profound way than they do attack man.
A message from Kosovo.
Yeah.
I'm interjecting countries because this is also audio. Thank you, Kosovo.
Yeah.
Thoughts down here on these questions? Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Of
Sweden.
course, when you hear about what your countries have been through, I realize I come from a totally different corner from this. We haven't had a war in Sweden for over 200 years, of various
But
reasons.
you do have a militaristic past going
We do
beyond
have a
that
very.
200 years.
Before that, we had been to so many wars that
Yeah.
we were so poor that everyone basically left for America. It's true. It's true. No, but what you are telling, the stories you are telling, is of course what we have seen. And coming from a very rich country where we set off 1% of our GDP in development cooperation, this is also how we want to use our funds to strengthen women in societies that have been through the horrors that you have. And that's what we've seen. And we know through our very long term cooperation and international outlook that women are needed at least as much as men. And we must, make room for women. So if we, coming from this rich part of the world, can facilitate, it's really our responsibility to do that. So that's where we come from as well.
So I wanted to turn to our first audience. I'm sorry, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, we are a peaceful region, yes, and so we have not faced conflict in the same way. But I go back, there was a book written about the society in Jamaica. My mother who fathered me. And we have had a different situation to deal with women in the Caribbean, where men were traditionally emasculated through slavery and that type of thing, and the women had to step forth. Now the difference is the women do not have the political power, but we like to say we are the neck that turns the head. And we had to, my husband usually say, you see around the corner, men see in straight lines, women see around, because we look at all eventualities. We are more relational. And as Ambassador said, they don't have time to get stuck in the idea of the conflict. They must move on because there are the children, their cousins, everybody depends on it. And so even though we don't have the political power, it says to us, we have to move on and we must find a way to deal with the situation. And that's why when you look at all the statistics UN Women put out, when women are involved, peace is more lasting, more forthcoming. When women are involved, governance is more transparent. When women are involved, the economy thrives. Women need to get involved, but in the Caribbean, sometimes we don't go out front in terms of the leadership, but you're behind. If you look at like the heads of departments and so, lots of women doing the hard work, because that's what you think. Women carry the brunt of the society, and so we don't get stuck in what has been. We have to move on.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing to my colleagues here, and they've said it all. I do believe women are agents for peace, and we have witnessed in our, Libya. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. We have witnessed in all of the reconciliation initiatives and efforts that we did that women don't have this competition and struggle for power that really hurted us and harmed us a lot. Women do think about the good for the society and the country, the good for the future of their children and the generations, while on the other hand, men can be drawn into the vicious cycle of power struggle, and that just is an obstacle to all peace initiatives and reconciliation. And that's one thing that's common between women, and probably men lack that.
If I could, and do you want to add anything? I can move into audience questions.
Well, I wanted to just make a comment on just the plight of women in general, and share with you all just my experience as a medical doctor, practicing in Africa and also practicing in the United States. I can honestly tell you that the plights of women are the same. And I have found myself using the psychology that I saw being used to manage depression from various reasons in my village, and I've used it in Tennessee. And I'll share a quick story with you. A young lady who would come to me, when a young woman in her 40s, the husband was cheating on her, and she was just sick and tired of it all, and she didn't know what else to do. And I jokingly said to her, well, where I come from in my village, it seems to me you're just ready to take off your clothes and run up and down the village naked. And she goes, I did it. I did it. I thought, you did what? She said, well, it was cold during winter, and she took off her clothes and she got on her riding mower, and she started just riding around the house, hoping that some neighbors can come out and that will embarrass her husband. Well, and I said, so what was your husband doing all this time? She said, he was by the door calling me, said, you're crazy, come back in, come back in. And she said, until she started getting cold, nobody came out. And, but it was so reminiscent of what happens in my culture. You see, when a woman marries, she doesn't just marry the husband, she marries the husband and the whole village. Mm-hmm. And then you pretty much submit yourself to the husband's village. And when you first get there, first your family tells you, you must represent us well, you must behave, and you must do. So the woman goes there and she works like a chicken without a head. She's running around like an ever-ready battery. Everybody that needs help, they're calling on her. And then her children start coming in and she's trying to say, I can't handle it anymore, it's too much, I need help. Nobody's paying attention. 2, 3 kids down the road, the woman has had it. So what the Zimbabwean woman would do in the village is take off her clothes and run up and down the village, and that's the ultimate embarrassment to the husband. And then suddenly, the elders are now calling for an emergency village meeting. Now that is the only way the husband can get into trouble. And that is the only way the woman can be heard. So now, what's being done by women in an African village, an American woman in Tennessee was doing it. I'm saying this to say, regardless of how we got to the state of disease means disease, be it disease of the physical body, disease of the mind, at the end of the day, the pain is the same. And how we deal with it as women, our survival mechanisms are the same. I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much. Do you tell us where your village was?
This is it's really pretty much a lot of cultures in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. But all Bantu tribes, really.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things, this is an audience questions, one of the things that's kind of consumed male-female relations in this country, you know what I'm about to ask, is the Me Too movement. Has there been any trickle out to any of your countries, and what are you seeing?
Well, certainly we have also a Me Too movement, and even if Finland has a very high gender equality, the Me Too movement has brought more attention and light to sexual harassment, and I think it has been very useful, especially in the sense that there is more discussion about what is proper behavior and improper behavior and what is not. In other words, sort of learning to understand better. And I think that's very, very important, because sometimes, you know, we think that everybody understands each other in this respect, but that's not really the case. So that has been very, very important. And in some fields, there have been quite a lot of cases which have come to light, and it seems that there are some sort of spheres of society where sexual harassment is sort of accepted. It's not accepted in the society at large, but for instance in entertainment industries, right. Like here as well, it's also in Finland, somehow it has been part of the culture. And with the Me Too movement and the discussions that have really sort of, there's been a lot of attention to it. I think the culture, there's a possibility that the culture gets healthier also in those sectors. So I think it's a very important discussion, and I'm happy that it's also reached Finland.
Anyone else, Me Too movement?
I think we still have a long way to go as Africans. I don't think we are even where we are having this conversation to the significant extent. I had an interesting conversation with someone that I thought I knew just this Christmas. And she just said, oh yeah, I was raped by my father since I was 6 years old till I was 13. I just about fell off my chair. This is someone that I thought I knew. When she finally fought him back, this is in Africa, he just went on to the next younger sister and to the next younger sister. So we have a long way to go as Africans, and the conversation has not even begun. So, Excellency Madam Mukadabana, we got work to do in Africa. We are nowhere near having the conversation where the conversation needs to be.
Right, but
Do you agree?
yes, absolutely, I agree with my sister. But country-specific, the movement is not lost on young women because sexual violence is criminalized, and people have used that to also report on rape. The problem now is to go from reporting and actually going on record to say I was raped. Sometimes they become anonymous because, again, because of the issue of stigma still attached to sexual violence and so on and so forth. But at the same time, because we have the process to punish people who have committed sexual violence, more and more, especially young women, are coming forward and they talk. The question has been whether you can start really pursuing somebody when it's an anonymous face who is accusing.
Right.
You know, so are we at a point where you can actually come and say I was raped and do it on an open forum? It becomes more and more difficult. And as she said, it's a long way to go before we.
So we have a true confessions. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's very, very important
Kosovo.
It's not only in Kosovo. I believe it's yes in Kosovo, but also here. It is very important to protect women that come out and speak up. Not only protect, but also embrace, support, and make sure that their stories don't end up being just the headline of the day. Because I fear if we are not consistent on the objective, which is sexual harassment, we will lose this conversation on proper names. You know, oh, did you see this X person sexually assaulted Y person? There are millions of women out there that have no platform. Women that work in hospitals, in schools, in farms, that are not celebrities. How do we stay focused on the subject, not on the names that are attached to the harassment?
So there's actually,
and I think we have to be much more cautious. Media needs to be much more cautious, but also the rest of us that are getting enthusiastic about the debate. We need to make sure that we stay focused on what's important, and what is important is the subject, not sexual harassment, not individual stories, which are very painful, yes, but there are millions of stories out there that have never been told.
So there's a question from the audience wanting to know if any of you have encountered sexual harassment in your career and how you reacted to it. Does anyone want to take that on?
I would like to take it on, but I would like to say something before that. While I do not disagree with you, I totally appreciate where you're coming from. But the truth is, if Alyssa Milano was not involved, we wouldn't have known that Tarana Burke started a Me Too movement. So there is place for celebrities, I think. But I hear you, we don't need to. In terms of my country, we have not reached where we ought to be. We have really not had the conversation. But I believe the men are paying attention. And even if women do not come out and say it, I believe that they are paying attention, and I believe their actions would be like that. Because it is very common, I can't give us, not going to give a specific incident, but it is very common in our culture. Men will slap you on the behind and, say, remarks, and that is commonplace. And some people almost take it for granted, and, some people like it, but I think now women are beginning to understand that this is not right, and men, more importantly, are beginning to understand that this is something that is not acceptable. And even if they do not come out like they're doing here, I think they are paying attention.
So we
I
are.
was not
if I may,
arrested.
go ahead.
Continue
Yes.
on that
Okay.
one. I
sorry.
think it is very important also to have in place sort of structures and methods through which you focus on issues like that. And for instance, in Finland, in almost every workplace, for instance, in the government, everywhere, including, for instance, my embassy, there's annually a sort of how should I put it, a study, inquiry made about different aspects of the workplace. Everybody answers anonymously, and the questions included are whether you have observed bad behavior in the workplace, whether you have observed sexual harassment or other kinds of harassment, and if you have yourself experienced. And you get the results from those studies, and if there's any indication that something like that has happened or has been observed, it's really the duty of the boss to address this issue. And there's a very detailed sort of method, instructions for the boss and the staff about how do you address these issues. Not generally, but really when something like that comes up and you know that in your workplace something like that has happened, how do you address it? So there has to be, I think it's very good that there's that kind of a mechanism in place where it's easy to sort of report, and then there is a clear path how you address it.
So we are out of time, but what I want to do is end on a personal question to each of you, and answer it from the heart. There's a lot of women in this audience, there's a lot of women in our broadcast audience who look at you all. You've reached the pinnacle of careers, you're strong women, you are the ultimate symbol of success. What is your advice to young women who want to pursue your path? Kosovo.
Well, thank you very
Briefly,
much
yeah.
for the qualification. I don't think I've reached the peak yet. But I think what my life story tells is that you can succeed against all the odds if you work hard, if you're committed, and if you put your heart on it. 18 years ago, I was a refugee. I was separated from everything I knew and loved. And here I am today, representing my country in Washington, D.C. So just stay focused, work hard, and whatever you choose to do it with honor and integrity.
Very powerful. Words from Libya.
From Libya. Yes, don't ever think you cannot make it. Whatever your heart, wherever your heart goes in your career, go for it, and you will come out winner if you focus, if you're committed. Don't ever think or hesitate or think you cannot make it. You can never know how brave you are or how courageous until you really face up to challenges, and only then you will realize how strong you are. I think we're all strong, and it's just how you judge yourself. So be strong, be assertive. Nobody will give you anything. You have to go for it and ask for it and take it, and take what you deserve. Whatever you see you deserve, go for it and do it for yourself.
Thank you. Advice from St. Kitts Nevis?
Well, what shall I say? After I went to the White House, I went home and I took a picture of the house a similar house to where I was born, a chattel house, half the size of this platform. My father, my mother, there were 8 surviving siblings. So it's obvious where I would have done my ablutions in an outhouse. And I'm raising it, but we all here have to be honest, and it's the elephant in the room, and so, and I don't mind that. And so as I look back, I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm from an extremely poor neighborhood, and so I'm probably the lowest on the totem pole. And I reflected on that just a few days ago in all the hoopla. And I went to a verse in Songs of Solomon 1:5. And the speaker is saying, she's saying, I'm dark but lovely. Or the NIV, the King James says, I am black but comely. And then she went on to say that, why are you staring at me? Because I'm black. And she said, my brothers were angry with me, and they sent me out into the vineyards. I neglected my own vineyard. And that said 3 things to me. One, she was saying she was looked down upon, discriminated because of her color. And because of her gender. She was punished because of her gender. And yet, she was talking about her self-worth. She says, I am dark as Solomon's curtain. Solomon is the king, so she equated herself to the king's curtain. So right away, it was, in spite of who I am, in spite of where I'm from, the Creator did not make any mistake. And so I must have some self-worth. And I thought, in God's tapestry of this universe, He has created each one of us for a purpose. Some of us might be a black skein of wool, a black thread, some white, some pink, some purple. But every one of us has a unique slot in that tapestry. And as long as we find that slot and be the best little color that we are, then it's going to enhance the whole tapestry. We enhance the tapestry, and those around us make us shine. And so my message to anyone is to find what your Creator ordained you to be. Find that slot. Be the best you can be, whatever it is, and enhance the tapestry of the universe. Thank you. Rwanda.
It's pretty unfair to say anything afterwards. I feel like, but I have to say that really I encourage people to be of service wherever they are at, whatever station in life they are in. One of the things, we have goals, we have dreams, but we never land there. You know, it's really when you start where you are in your community, in extending yourself. I didn't plan to become where I am. Actually, I was very happy being
a professor.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think whatever I did while I was a professor, before then, in refugee camps, I was always doing those. I was putting a little stone on the top of one of the other. It's when, when you leave your country and you are young, you are not with your parents, you are not with any role model, you need to find an internal grounding. And that Even though eventually I abandoned it, but it was, for me it was my Catholicism until I abandoned Catholicism because I equated it to genocide. You know, later on I made peace with it. But what I'm saying, at least during that time, the concepts of Christianity were able to keep me out of trouble. But also they were able to promote me in a certain direction. Yes. But you become involved where you are. Once you, especially everyone has challenges. Everyone, you know, whether they are big, small, however you are. And sometimes we tend to go into narcissistic suffering. That's one of the biggest killing of anything that you can do in your life.
So being around refugees and seeing help and wanting to help grounded you, is that what you're saying?
And then to see that I still have my 2 legs, I was healthy, even in refugee camps. There are other people who were not really as lucky as I was. Yeah. So that also gave me the mission and responsibility to extend myself and to extend whatever I had in that. So I think you can't land being in ambassador place. You can't land in top of foreign policy, but when you start where you are, even if you are in school, you know, I think you start in school, you start in volunteering, you start by looking at the other as a human being, where you can make a big difference. So I believe that we all have that capacity to reach the higher goals.
Thank you. Yeah. Sweetie.
It's very hard to come after these fantastic stories, so I'll be a bit more maybe concrete. I think it's very important not to think about that you're a woman so much. Think about that you are very capable and what you're doing. Work hard. Think more like a man. If there's an application for a job and it says you need these 8 qualities, a woman will say, oh, I only have 7, I can't apply. A man would say, oh, 2, that's me. And I think and that's how women have to think as well. We are a bit overcautious sometimes, and you know, think that you have to be perfect. No, it's about getting things done. You know, going maybe round the corners a bit, and actually career planning. Look ahead. What do you want to do? What's the job you want to have after your next job? So it's really being quite concrete about it and be a bit bold.
Thank you. African Union.
I was raised in a village in Zimbabwe by a woman who would always tell us that work never killed anybody, just do it. I had a brother who was very lazy, and mother would give us little portions of land to work. And my brother would spend more time to negotiate and play games with the rest of us and figure out how he can get us to do his work. And I still remember, even as a little girl, how we would be done with our work and he's still trying to figure out how to get us to get his work, to do his work. I remember now raising my own children, and I would now say to them, if this world was a beehive, I could never be a queen because I enjoy work. I will have to be a worker bee. I thrive off of work. I was raised by a woman who didn't understand why any woman should just sit around the house and do nothing. Surely there's got to be something for you to do. There's a dress you could mend. You could rearrange this or rearrange that. Didn't realize how much that has become so much part of me. I truly thrive off of work. I enjoy just working, regardless of what it is. I remember visiting one of my fellow doctors and we were talking about work ethic. I said, Doc, if you pay me enough, I'll find dirt in your living room that you didn't even know existed. Because if I make up my mind to vacuum your house and clean your house, I'm going to clean it the best way I know how. That's good. So to young people, I say to you, whether you are getting compensated or not, if you make a decision to do something, give it the best you know how, and the rest will follow.
Finland, you have to top them all.
I agree with everything that has been said, but I have to say, you said that we are strong women, and I have never identified myself as a strong woman, so I started to think, what is it, strength? And if you would pose the question, how come I am here, and then what is my piece of advice, it would be true to yourself, do what you are passionate about, and thirdly, I am a big believer in sisterhood and brotherhood, so support the others, have friends, networks, and offer your support to others. So I think that's what.
Well, I
would
want to
like
thank
say.
this panel for sharing your perspectives, but also your lives and your hearts with us tonight. Thanks to all of you. And thanks to all of you. Thank you for coming. Please come to our next event. Do we have a date, Bev? It's coming up soon? Not yet, but be sure to be here. But thank you for coming. We really